Hello there, welcome. This is Jenna from McGuire. I have a really short video for you today showing a fun technique that you can do with embossing folders. Now, I just recently went live with Gina K and we shared some ideas for using this embossing folder and die set, and I had this additional idea, so I wanted to go ahead and film it so I could share it right away. So in this video, we'll make this card that you see here, but be sure to also check out the live where I showed how to do this one. And I will put a link to that live in the description below. All right, so let's dive into today's technique. This is something you can do with any embossing folder, but I'll be using the new 3D embossing folder from Gina K Designs called Contemporary Floral. This is actually a 3D embossing folder, and coordinating dies come with it. You can see the two dies on the right. And there is a layering stencil set that goes with it. And I really appreciate that all of that is available so that you can use this in so many different ways. Please note that on the packaging, Gina has put the sandwich to use with this 3D embossing folder for her Intri-Cut, and these can be used with any die cut machine, just using the typical thick 3D embossing folder sandwich. Now this is the Gina K Intri-Cut, which is her die cut machine that's fantastic. I love it because it has these dials on it. According to the package, for this embossing folder, you set the dial to 2D emboss, and then you change the pressure to B3. So Gina figured that out for us. It's on the packaging. It makes it easy to figure out. You may need to adjust a little bit to make it a bit tighter depending on your machine, but I found this worked well. Now, along with that, you just need the platform and the embossing folder, no other plate. I like to mist my cardstock on both sides a bit with water first. It gives you a deeper impression without the risk of the cardstock kind of ripping or becoming a little frayed. So you put that into the embossing folder and then run it through your die cut machine without the top plate. Again, if you don't have the Intri-Cut, just follow your manufacturer's instruction for using a very thick 3D embossing folder. Never force a folder through your machine. You always want to be careful. And look at this fun, sweet pattern that you get just from the embossing folder alone. I'm going to do that again because I really like this background and I can save these for later. Now, there are so many techniques you can do with embossing folders, especially 3D embossing folders, because the dimension is outstanding. I will put a link up here on the top right and in my description below to a video where I show lots of techniques. I'm going to focus on one today that I really like. Now, after you've done the embossing folder, because we misted it with water, I will heat set it before I do any kind of inking. Now, I also wanted to mention with this embossing folder, it comes with the two little flower dies. If you'd like to use the embossing folder on little flowers like this, I recommend die cutting first. And I just die cut that from cardstock. Any cardstock would work. I put a little tape runner on the back of the flower just to hold it in position as I do this. And you can see I'm just lining up the flowers with the flowers in the embossing folder. So I am actually putting these flowers onto the area where the flowers are raised in the embossing folder. You could do the opposite if you prefer. And once I've got a few of them with adhesive on the back, I'll just line them up and run that through our die cut machine. I very much recommend doing your die cutting first, then the embossing folder, because if you do it the other way around, it will tend to flatten it and you'll lose a lot of that detail. So you end up with dimension on these little die cuts, which really brings them to life, and it allows you to have accents to go along with your embossing folder background. You could even create a background just with these little flowers. If you want to bring them to life even more, you can add a little inking to the center of the flowers, any inks you want, any colors you want, and it really allows that dimension to stand out even more. Okay, so now that I've shown you that embossing folder and the dies, let's use them along with the stencils to create the card that you see here. I'm going to do one of my favorite embossing folder techniques. This is really fun to do and works great with this particular folder. So I am finding the side of the folder where the flowers are raised. I'm putting a little bit of temporary tape runner on the back of a piece of white cardstock, and then I'm running it through my die cut machine. By putting that little bit of tape in there or that glue, I am making sure that when I open this again, that the cardstock stays put in that embossing folder. Now on the other side of the embossing folder, I'm applying Gina K Sea Glass ink. I really like to use light colors for this, but you could really use anything you want. And I'm rubbing that ink around and dabbing it. Then I'll close the embossing folder and run it through again. When I take it out, you can see that ink has transferred to the background. See, the side of the embossing folder I'm putting this ink on is the side where the background is raised. So when I rub this ink over the surface, the background will end up having ink when we run it through. I don't recommend using a foam ink pad for this because the ink will probably get into the flowers. A firm ink pad like Gina K's works perfect for it. And that will smooth a little bit as it dries, as Gina K's inks always do. Now let's use the coordinating stencils to add color to those flowers. You could leave them as white, I think that's fun, but let's add some color. I have the Gina K grip mat, which is actually a double stamp turned upside down, so you can use it as stamp or a grip mat. I'm lining up the first stencil, and I will apply butterscotch ink just towards the centers, fading out towards white at the tips. Now this is something you could do without the stencil. However, this will make sure you keep it very clean and you don't get any yellow ink on the blue background. So I'm using a Gina K blending brush. You can see I have them all over on the left-hand side. These are her detail brushes. I found this stand that is the perfect fit for them, and I'll link for that below. It's inexpensive. Now I'm starting right at the center of the flowers and doing a swirling motion, kind of going out towards the tips so that the tips are completely white, but it fades to that beautiful butterscotch color in the center. This is going to give us the look of almost white flowers in the end because I will color the center of those flowers gold in a bit. But I love that there's this stencil, so I could color this entire flower whatever color I want, and it won't affect that blue background that we have. In fact, between the technique that I just showed you to get the colored background and these layering stencils, you can take a piece of white cardstock and completely cover it with color. So the flowers, the leaves, and the background have color. It's a great way to create a dynamic background that looks really cool with dimension and lots of color. All you have to do is add a sentiment and you have a beautiful card. So that is the first stencil. Now it's time to move on to the second stencil, which does all the leaves. Now you could get creative with this and do different shades of green, do a lot of shading, but I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Over the stencil, I will use Jelly Bean Green ink, and I'm applying it so that it's heavier at the base of the leaves and goes to lighter at the tips, almost white at the tips. This I do by starting on the stencil right at the base of the leaf and doing a swirling motion that lightens up towards the tip. This is a great way to give an additional look of dimension to this background. Now, after I did the Jelly Bean Green, I did think it would be fun to come in and add even more depth to that. In other words, adding even more darker green towards the base of the leaves. So I came in with Lucky Clover, which is one of my favorite green inks, and I did that just at the base of each of those leaves. This is a really great and easy way to give that look of dimension, but you could instead do different color flowers if you prefer. And there we have our inked background. Now there is a third stencil that allows you to do the centers. I thought it would be fun to use a gold gel on it. So I'm using Simon Hurley Lunar Paste. I believe this is the slippery when wet color. Now, I have a tip here because I didn't really do it, and I wish I had. When you apply this, make sure you really hold that stencil down nice and tight so that the paste doesn't go underneath the stencil at all. Because this has dimension, our cardstock has dimension, it kind of lifts the stencil away, so a little bit of the paste can get behind the stencil. Now mine wasn't too bad, but if I were to do this again, I would have done one center at a time and been careful, or use less paste. I put on a very, very heavy amount, but you'll see the results are still just fine. And in that live I did with Gina, I showed another way to get a gold center without too much dimension, so be sure to check that out. And look at those beautiful centers. Now this is really easy. I finished it off screen because it's simple. I trimmed that background down to be 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and I added it to a white note card that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I used foam tape to add it. I also added gold gemstones at the center of each of those flowers once that lunar paste was dry, and I just love the gold shine on this. Now that sentiment is gold heat embossed, one of my favorite sentiments from Gina K that I use so much, and I thought the sweet sentiment worked really well with the sweet background. And of course, I have a matching Gina K envelope. Before we go, I thought I'd show you the card that I made in Gina's Live. It's a variation of this technique. It's another way to get an ink colored background and then the flowers be whatever color you want. You gotta laugh here. I made this card upside down. I have to fix it, but I left it like this for the video because I think a lot of you can relate. Now on this one, again, the background is that same sea glass color, but this time the flowers are indented into the cardstock and pressed into the cardstock. So it's reverse. And be sure to check out that live for this easy variation of the technique. On this one, I used a gold pen at the center of the flowers, which was easy to do. All right, there you have a fun use of Gina's new contemporary floral embossing folder die set and stencils. And you can do this with a variety of embossing folders you have. If you're interested in what I used, I have it linked below in my YouTube description. And I also have a link to that live from Gina and a similar technique video. I'll link here at the end. I thank you for watching this. I thought it'd be fun to do a short video, but I'll be back with a longer one very soon. Take care.